Grüß, willkommen in einem video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 2 of my battle series of videos. This video is covering the Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BC. The Battle of Megiddo was fought between Egyptian forces under the command of Pharaoh Thutmose III and a large rebellious coalition of Canaanite vassal states led by the king of Kadesh. This video is mainly focused on looking at the battle from a figure gaming point of view, which includes the order of battle, troop types, and the flow of the battle. If you wish a big picture of why the battle was fought, then this may not be the video for you, but if you want to know about the troop types, force mixes, and what actually occurred on the battlefield and why, then continue to view on. Megiddo is the first battle to have been recorded in what is accepted as relatively reliable detail. Megiddo is also the first recorded use of the composite bow and the first body count. All details of this battle comes from Egyptian sources, primarily the hieroglyphics writing on the Hall of Anus in the temple of Amun-Re at Karnak, Thebes, by the military scribe Tajani. The ancient Egyptian account gives the date of the battle as the 21st day of the first month of the third season of year 23 of the reign of Thutmose III. It has been claimed that this was April the 16th, 1457 BC, according to the Middle Chronology, although other publications place the battle in 1482 BC or 1479 BC. The Egyptians routed the Canaanite forces, which managed to flee safely to the city of Megiddo. Allowing the Canaanites to withdraw to the city resulted in a lengthy siege of Megiddo. Nonetheless, the Egyptians did win in the end. This victory allowed the re-establishment of Egyptian dominance in the Levant. Thutmose III began a reign in which the Egyptian empire reached its greatest expanse. During Thutmose III's first campaign in the Levant, his personal scribe, Taniji, kept a daily journal on parchment. In approximately his 42nd regional year, or regal year, many years after the campaigns in Levant had ended, Thutmose III instructed his artisans to inscribe his military exploits into the walls of Amun-Re's temple at Karnak. The annals described in lavish detail 14 campaigns led by Thutmose III in the Levant, the booty gained through his campaigning, tribute received from conquered regions, and lastly, offerings to Amun-Re. The direct cause of this battle was the Egyptian buffer provinces in the land of Amur along the border with the Hittites attempted to change their vassalage. This resulted in an Egyptian response, and Thutmose III decided to deal with the threat personally. The Canaanites were thought to have been allied with the Mitanni and Amur from the region of the two rivers between the headwaters of the Orontes and the Jordan. The driving and main force behind the revolt was the king of Kadesh. The powerful fortress of Kadesh offered protection to him and the city. The king of Megiddo, with an equally strong fortress, joined the rebel alliance. Let's look at the Egyptian army in a little bit more detail. Thutmose III led an army which during the battle divided into three parts. Two parts of the army seemed to be similar in size, with a third being a smaller force. It's possible the army was originally organised into two main divisions, each of which could have consisted up to 10,000 men, and a smaller detachment, or the smaller part, was a detachment from one or both of these divisions. We do not possess any information concerning the size of the Egyptian armies. Most scholars put the Egyptian army between 10,000 and 20,000 men. I'm assuming the upper total may be the most likely. It's also estimated that there were between 1,000 to 2,000 Egyptian chariots involved in the battle. These were two two-horse chariots, with a primary weapon being the bow. However, the bulk of the Egyptian army would have been the infantry, armed with swords, axes, and carrying shields, as well as some carrying bows. Let's now drill down into the possible troop types involved in the battle. I'll be using the DBMM troop classification as my guide. The two-horse light chariot was the primary shock element of the Egyptian army. This troop type proved critical in the battle and probably numbered around about 2,000. A very low number of troops may have been mounted on horses or asses, riding them in the same manner as donkeys. This troop type would have not had much impact during the battle, but was important in terms of scouting and messaging. A small number of foot were classed as royal guards, armed with axes as well as spear and shields. I suspect these may have been with Thutmose III and may have consisted of a single unit of between 500 and 1,000 men. They would have been permanent troops, highly trained and with extremely good morale. However, the Egyptian spearman was the bedrock of the Egyptian army and, together with the close order archers, pretty much constituted the overwhelming bulk of the army. I'm assuming the number of the spearmen was between 4,000 and 8,000 men, depending on the size of the overall army. A number of the close order troops would have been archers or close order archers. It's estimated half of the close order troops may have consisted of close order archers, which means from 4,000 to 8,000 close order archers were in the army, working very closely with the close order spearmen. Some archers would have performed skirmish functions. The smaller third force, which outflanked the city, may have consisted of this troop type and could have numbered from 2,000 to 4,000 men, probably the lower number. Now let's look at the Canaanite army. The actual commander and the size of the Canaanite army is unknown. It is thought the commander of the Canaanite army was the king of Kadesh, who fielded an army of 10,000 to 15,000 men. I'll use the higher figure, although considering how easily Egypt managed to defeat the Canaanites, it's possible this may not be correct and we should use the lower number. Troop quality should also, or could have also been a factor, which is why I tend to err on the high army or the high number, but of course there would have been a fair amount of poorly trained militia. It's estimated the Canaanites may have fielded as many as 1,000 chariots, all 2-crew, 2-horse light chariots. As with the Egyptians, the bulk of the forces consisted of infantry armed with spears, short swords and axes, supported by archers. Let's now drill down into the troop types using the DBMM classification as our guide. The elite forces in the Canaanite army were the royal chariots, which were 2-crew chariots, 2-horse as well. They were almost certainly permanent soldiers and would have been reasonably well trained and motivated, the elite shock formation of the Canaanite forces. The bulk of the chariot forces consisted of the standard chariotry, which were also 2-crew, 2-horse chariots. Still reasonably good quality and reasonably permanent troops, but certainly not as good as the royal chariots. However, both forces together really constituted the bulk of the shock forces of the Canaanite army, as it did for the Egyptians. I lack an image of a Canaanite mounted scout, but there would have been a very small number of them, and they would have been mainly used as scouts. The Canaanite elite foot were the royal guards, which were armed with axes and bow. The number of this troop type would have been reasonably low. The bulk of the infantry were spear and javelin armed foot, some of them armed with a shield and with a little bit of armour. Apart from the spear and javelin armed regular foot, there were also bow armed close order troops, likely a mix of close order bow which fought with the spearmen and also containing some skirmish bowmen. Let's now look at the battle, or the sequence of the battle. When the Egyptians moved towards Megiddo, the Egyptians had 3 paths which they could use to attack Megiddo. 2 were easy, and the central one was difficult and risky. The king of Kadesh covered the 2 easy paths, but ignored the difficult path as he felt it would not be taken due to its risk. The Egyptians decided to take this unexpected route, which placed the Canaanite army at a severe disadvantage. Once the Canaanite commander discovered the Egyptians were threatening Megiddo, he marched his army up to meet the Egyptians. I have to assume he did not have his full army with him, as he would have also had detachments covering the other path, which could have been much further away. Another alternative is the other detachments joined him. Regardless, he was in a very poor position to meet the combined Egyptian army due to this bold move by the Egyptian commander. After this bold move, the Egyptians formed up in front of Megiddo with the Canaanite army blocking their path. Both the armies spent the night in their positions, or alternatively in their camp, and on the following morning the Egyptians divided their army into 2. The main Egyptian army was to cross a brook on the right flank of the Egyptian position and attacked the Canaanite forces defending the main path to Megiddo. According to this account, the main Canaanite camp and army blocked this path but was positioned further away closer to Megiddo. We're uncertain how this attack went as there's no record. However, some information is present which gives us a rough idea. When the Egyptians crossed the brook, the Canaanites initially resisted, but after a short fight quickly withdrew to their main position close to the city. This was a superior defensive position. I have to assume the forces covering the brook were light skirmish troops. On the Egyptian left flank, the Egyptian flanking forces divided into two groups, and the Canaanites decided to send part of the army to meet them. The far outflanking Egyptian force probably consisted of light skirmish troop which moved rather rapidly. On the Egyptian right flank, the main Canaanite army before the camp held its position, and the Egyptian forces facing it pinned it into that position so it couldn't respond to the Egyptian flanking attack. On the Egyptian left flank, one part, the smaller part, which probably consisted primarily of skirmishers, drove deep behind Megiddo in an outflanking manoeuvre. The Canaanite forces that were sent to meet this outflanking force took up position in defensive terrain without being able to block this deep outflanking manoeuvre. I suspect because they found themselves facing a powerful force to their front, so had to quickly form up to meet it. On the Egyptian right flank, the main Egyptian line advanced and attacked the main Canaanite army. This must have consisted of the heaviest Egyptian infantry supported by some chariots as well as bow. The Egyptian centre now advanced and engaged the Canaanites. The main Egyptian striking force was likely in the centre position, and as a result, this attack sliced through the Canaanite forces quickly, routing the enemy. It's likely the Canaanite forces probably consisted primarily of skirmish troops, or infantry, as well as some chariots. After the Canaanite forces had routed back into the city, the Egyptian centre swung around and attacked the main Canaanite flank. The Canaanite forces on the Egyptian right were holding against the Egyptians, so this flank attack was a critical move by the Egyptians. When the Egyptian centre struck the main Canaanite army in the flank, this would have caused it to break and rout into Megiddo. Unfortunately for the Egyptian right flank, instead of pursuing the Canaanites, decided to loot their camp, resulting in the Canaanites, or the bulk of the Canaanite forces, being able to get into the city. With the battle ending and the main Canaanite army escaping into the city, the Egyptians were forced into a long siege. Eventually the siege was successful, so while not a complete victory, it was a significant Egyptian victory nonetheless. This concludes episode 2 of my battles video series, in this case covering the Battle of Megiddo. Alle guten Dinge, kommen zu einem Ende.